Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Devika Girish, and this is my co-curator, Bedatri. Um, we're the co-curators of the series Kraanti, a series of 9 documentaries that portray visions of grassroots resistance in India. The series is currently screening at the Maysles Documentary Center's virtual cinema, with all proceeds from ticket sales going to COVID-19 relief for marginalized and affected communities across South Asia. We hope you've been watching these films over the last couple of weeks, and if you haven't, you have one more week to catch up. And we're doing this in conjunction with Saeed, South Asian Artists in Diaspora, which is the collective that has been organizing these fundraising campaigns. So a special thanks to them as well as Maysles for hosting us, and of course to the filmmakers who've made this possible, and some of whom we have with us today to dig a little deeper into their films and the portraits of resistance that they've brought to the fore, which we're really excited about. Bedatri, you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you so much, Maysles, Saeed, and our filmmakers, and thank you, Devika, for doing this with me. So I think I can start with Uma's film, which is called Ek Inqilab Aur Aaya. And maybe Uma, and I know that your films have always dealt with women and resistance, be it within a political sphere or a larger political dimension, or even like within their own domestic lives, because I know you've worked a lot with women's journals and diaries in the past. And for those who haven't watched Uma's previous films, they're not all of them, but some of them are available online. So what inspired you to make this film, Uma?
Firstly, I'm an accidental filmmaker. I discovered a wonderful archive of a woman's let's say reading practices, and I suddenly got excited at that, and I made one film, and then I made another, and finally, I don't know how I got into this. I said I'm going to make one more film, and it's going to be on women who go to jail for their political work. And that's how it began. And so Ek Inqilab actually comes out of, it's the first of a series that I've started to come out. And it came out of the fact that I kind of rediscovered a colleague of mine, and I had not known she'd been to jail, and she'd been to jail at the age of 16 in 1949. And, it struck me as a real a shock that women were being put in prison for their political work in the early years of independence. I mean, straight after independence, here's this girl who gets for her left-wing activities. So I thought, I should do an interview with her. And then when I did the interview with her, I discovered that there were many layers to her account, which I got interested in. And so it became a story of 2 generations of women in our family, and in a teaching institution, which that in Lucknow, where they were training people to be learned and to be sort of schooled in theology and philosophy and so on. And what was interesting is that there were books written about this place, but there was not one line on women. And these women are people who are reproducing that entire structure, because and many of them were learned themselves. They were actually translating and stuff like that. So the backstory of this girl going to jail started to become interesting, and it became a film on history. I'm a historian, so it became a film on the history of a period 1920 to 1949, and the transitions that are taking place in women's lives just around, we're talking what we are today, 15th, it's 15th of August, and it's the transition around before and after independence and partition, which is the backstory for these 2 women. And so that's how I started. I got into making the film, a full film on her, which I wasn't intending. and it became something which required a certain degree of creativity, but I'll leave that for the moment. This is how I began.
That's really fascinating.
Sorry, Devika. I
Oh,
just
sorry.
wanted to provide a little context for people who are watching that today is August 15th, which is India's Independence Day. And it just is a wonderful coincidence to be talking of resistance on a day which is brought forth by years of resistance. Yeah. So just wanted to
Definitely.
shoehorn that in.
Yeah, and Uma, what you said about this film, coming to being out of an omission that you noticed in official history, I thought, that's really fascinating. And that is something that Somnath, your film also kind of does, in the sense that your documentary, The Battle of Bhima Koregaon, is really like giving us an alternative historical portrait, and an alternative to official histories that we know, actually of this road to India's independence, which again makes it so topical. And of course, the site that your film is set in, and the historical event that whose present day reverberations it captures, have been in the news a lot recently. And so I think your film has become really vital as an actual record of what it means to the people there, and what the core significance and the core tensions there are, which I think have spiraled into something huge in the last couple of years, with a lot of different vested interests coming in. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about what inspired you to make your film.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, Somnath.
Yes. What is your question?
What inspired you to make the film, The Battle of Bhima Koregaon?
Okay. Look, I think we, because this is very personal history. I don't say is a parallel histories, or is not a parallel history actually. Actually, in India, if we saw the context of historical writings in Maharashtra, there is a movement called rewriting history. Entire debate of Indian politics is debate of history. What Baba Sahib will say is is a battle between Brahminism versus Buddhism. So we 2018s across the non Ambedkarite or non Dalit circles, people know this is something history is happening, and people are celebrating this history long time. But we as a community member, we this is our childhood history basically. And there is a lot of histories in India, which and there is a so-called progressive circle or a liberal circle. They are also responsible, because in academia or in documentary filmmakers, mostly they are liberals. But even before 2018 and after 2018s, there is politics around the Dalit histories in India. They mostly right wing and even left wing. They both are tried to destroy Dalit histories in different ways. I say very carefully, both right and left. And I am making a film because I am a media student. I studied media studies, and I'm working with the Film Institute also for as a contract employee. And I realize there is a very less Dalit representation and even marginal communities representation, even in stories and filmmaking. So mostly the question of representation, and there are a lot of people. They are mostly they belong to a dominant caste, and dominant castes are more, historically Indian oppressor, and they are making films on Dalits and Adivasis, and they and minorities, and they make their careers. But they saw it's like for them these histories or these stories is like for their career. they not honestly make a films on Dalits. There are a lot of film. There is there is Jai Bhim Comrade, or there is India Hunter. These films are very problematic on Dalit movement. So basically, I want to make stories in our perspective, mostly within community perspective. That's why I make films.
Thanks, Somnath. That's really well said, and I take your point that it's not a parallel history, but it's a personal history. It depends on who is speaking for it to be a parallel or an alternative history. So I think that was well said. Bedatri, I know you had a question for our next set of filmmakers.
Yeah, Savnik, I'm not sure you can hear us. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm so sorry. I've just had a crazy day and I joined in late.
Not
Hi,
at
guys.
all. We're really glad to have you, and I hope you were able to catch Somnath's answer.
And not Somnath. Hi, it's so nice to meet you, Uma. Like it's just amazing to be sitting. It feels like I'm sitting in very, very august company, and I'm totally not deserving of this. But thank you for having me here.
No, each one of you are more than deserving to be here. Devika and I have been feeling extremely awkward for sitting amidst these people, and we've been very nervous, just so you know. But Savnik, I know it's been a few years, but if you could, and I happen to know of the other things that you've been working on since, which are also extremely interesting films. But if you could just go back a few years and talk about making source, and like Somnath said, there is this idea of mainstream history and parallel history, how even that, and he just brought it out so beautifully, how even that idea and bifurcation is so flawed. And how did that play into you and Tushar? And I wish he could join us today, but how did that play into you and Tushar making source?
I often think, Bedatri, that if it wasn't our first film, I think Source wouldn't have happened. I think there was a lot of lack of understanding of how the world functions. There were concepts that we hadn't yet thought through completely. We had ideas of what it means to be a region in struggle, and then what it, and never have really had thought about what it means to be an Indian. Went with a whole bunch of concepts and ideas to Kashmir, and now that I'm working on my second film, I see that there was some level of intuition which was at play. There was an understanding of the fact that, okay, despite being a documentary filmmaker and your quest to want to tell the story from eye level, and not to parachute into a place, you want to get deep into the characters' lives. You want to tell the story as intimately as is possible. And I reached there and I realized what a big lie it would be, and what a sham of an attempt it would be to try and, as Indians with a camera in Kashmir, what does it mean to go and talk to people, and what does it mean to go tell their stories? Those were things that started to weigh very heavily, because all of the notions that we'd held as things we knew were being challenged, and there was a lot of self-reflection that had to be done. And despite seeing that the film is taking shades of it being an educational film, but we just realized that that the issue of Kashmir is so fraught that the moment it comes out, they're polar opposite sides. As if you're an Indian, you cannot even empathize with a history that has existed, a history which is really true for people, a history which is their lived history, remembered history. Music and poetry, of course, really helped us navigate and bring in the history, looking at this place with the context of the 400 years, the several rulers that have come, the memories of people that they hold very, very dear, and the effect that it has today in forming the psyche, in the way the people think. Of course, it's very disconcerting when you reach Kashmir. There are so many army people who are toting their guns, you're always looked at as suspect. There is a sort of paranoia that starts to kind of creep under your skin. And we were really kindly taken under the wing by Zarif Sahab, by some people who are actually out there with their opinions, because that was another thing. You chase people for their opinions, you get them on camera. What does it mean for them? What does it mean to have a person who's not out in the open to risk their liberty, their safety for the sake of your film? So those were some critical choices that had to be made quite in the beginning, knowing that that we are trying to chase someone called MC Cash. Really want him to be on the film because, you know, so young, so passionate, his music, you know, it's so eye-opening. He's talking history, he's naming the martyrs, people who've died 80 years ago, 90 years ago, remembering each of those names, each of those stories. That was so important. And realizing that when he made his song I Protest, that his studio was ransacked, that he was picked up by the army, that he stays underground, that he does not meet people. Those were factors that really informed the journey that it ended up being. We just realized that as Indians, all we could do was make sense of the history that has happened through the current voices that are coming. So contemporize this oral passed down memory of generations, which is kind of being, I won't say revived because that is a wrong word, but like is almost repurposed in a way, or made accessible in a way where people who are outside of the region can access it, can start to understand it. And it helped us a lot because initially we were very scared when the film came out that there was going to be a lot of hoo-ha about it, or we are going to get into scuffles with people. The PSBT festival was where the film premiered. They were very tensed about it. They had security and everything, and we were really surprised that people did not really the opposition that we thought that our film could bring, because we knew that we were making it for an Indian audience who've got their mind pretty much set about Kashmir. They do not give a shit about the loss of life, and also the projection of Kashmir that is in the Indian imagination. How could we take it away from there? So it's very difficult to say now how the film started or what drove us to it. I think it was just destiny that took us there. I think it was our first film and the naivete that took us there. If someone asked me to pick up the camera again and go back to Kashmir, I don't think I would. I understand what Somnath says, what it means to, parachute into something. And I believe that film needed several more years, a lot more meditation. And even though I'm glad that we did the film, but what I feel about that film now is, as an artist, it has done something to me, and I think my understanding of the world, it was only a contribution to my own personal life and my personal journey as an artist, because I don't really know if we managed to take the discourse forward anywhere. I feel conflicted about having made the film, of having gone and accepted a national award for it, despite the film getting banned. So, the film opened up a whole world of things about me as an artist, what it means to go chasing a story, what it means to delve into something which is so beyond what you thought of. You're not a researcher, you're an artist. So what does it mean to bring your research into your art? What does it mean to take an educational approach and go with it like we are blank canvases? Can you help us? Can you educate us? Can you help us? And I think that approach kind of really helped. And so we were taken as students of history, as students of cinema, and really guided along the way by people. And thank God for that, I look back at the film with a certain kind of, yes, I know that it is not going to be done again, but with a certain kind of, I'm glad that we did it. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, Savnik. Not too many filmmakers would. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate your candor. And what you're saying about, this, like, how do you change the Indian mindset about Kashmir, go in and like shake up people's sort of projection of what Kashmir is. It's a perfect segue to A Season in My Paradise, which is, the film by Shahzeb and Siraj. And, your film is probably the most recent film we have in the lineup. It's really off the moment. And also, we came up with this whole series and project, Kraanti, because we felt that the pandemic was not only affecting certain communities disproportionately, but it was throwing into relief things that have already existed, injustices and systems of oppression that have already existed. The pandemic made them glaring in a way that we knew we had to sort of bring the two together, seize this opportunity to make people see, the ways in which our society and is broken. And I feel like something similar sparked your film, where you just took the pandemic and you turned it into a meditation on something much broader. So tell us a little bit like about the moments that really inspired the making of your film.
I think, Shahzeb, do you want me to start? Or should I?
Yeah, sure.
So I think this film was made, you talk about how recent this film was. I think it was made in 2019, in the November of 2019, before the CA&RC protests broke out, and before we even had an inkling of what a pandemic would be like, what a lockdown would look like. And so for us, the idea was, because for Shahzeb, it's a lived experience. For me, I'm an outsider. And so we had this brief conversation about how does it feel to be in that lockdown, that very intimate feeling of being in your home. You can't leave because there is a military outside. I can never live that. And so Shahzeb, someone who's lived through that, and we had this very brief conversation about what we wanted to do post August 5th. And we wanted to talk to Indians, mainland Indians, and ask them, some of them who were in support of the abrogation of Article 370. And we wanted to ask them and have these very elaborate, long interviews with them about what it would be like to be in a lockdown. And, to be able to craft that question, to be able to craft that interview that would last for hours. And you're just trying to talk about, Shahzeb bringing in this entire experience and then turning it into a questionnaire, that. And I think Shahzeb should take away from here, because for him, I think it's a much more personal experience than it was for me.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So I think when we actually made the film and where we are right now, it's been a journey with personally me, and the film has kind of grown as the time has passed. And initially it was a simple attempt by me and Siraj to actually do something different with the abrogation of Article 370, because there was a bombardment of content on the news, and you were hearing all sorts of stories. And then there was the other side of it, apart from the political, that was the personal, and where the entire state was in an absolute lockdown, where people couldn't go out of their homes. There were no telephones, no internet, nothing. So yeah, from there the idea went, and we thought the biggest challenge was to create a lockdown in a bustling city like New Delhi. I mean, how do you create a lockdown in New Delhi, a city that never sleeps? Yeah, and from there the idea kind of grew. And the major challenge, I think, which I didn't realize then, but if I look at it right now, I probably would list it as the biggest challenge was how do you separate the political from the personal? I mean, it was a lived experience, and it sort of went into the personal sphere as well. And then it was Kashmir, which is such a volatile topic. I mean, everyone has an opinion on Kashmir. Everyone has an opinion on Kashmir. So how do you, how could I personally separate my personal from the political? Was it a film? Was it a catharsis of sorts? I mean, now that I look at it, it turned out well. It was our first film, and I am personally just happy that we were actually able to register and our protest and our dissent in some way, in a time when it's absolutely impossible to register your dissent in any way. Yeah.
And I remember the number of questions that would that encircle around it. I mean, when you have such a film, and then when it's being screened elsewhere, it's being screened abroad, and you keep questioning, this idea that what if somebody sees it and doesn't like the content of it, and then the questions that follow. Are you trying to create a lockdown in India? Was a question that we really we were worried about, because you were basically in some ways showing what it would look like if Delhi was in lockdown. And then somehow the film was prophetic in its nature, that somewhere down the line, lockdowns became a norm, not militarized lockdowns, but lockdowns in the essence of it. And I think the challenge even now is, in fact, with our second film also, where we went to Kashmir and we spoke to people, is that you can never truly bring you can't really talk about Kashmir through just a film. You can't really talk about it through just a book. You can't really talk about, so you're literally scrambling for the medium to talk about it. And I mean, it's quite impossible, really. How do you do that? Like, when you sit across a Kashmiri who, after an hour's worth of conversation, tells you that, it tells you about his experience, about his lived experience in that lockdown, and to hear that as an Indian, to hear that with somebody who probably has, who's lived that life where you hold certain things dear and near to your heart of this country, and then you're suddenly hearing this person who's gone through so much in those lockdowns, in those militarized lockdowns. So I really don't think, I really don't think a film can do justice. I really don't think a book can do justice. I mean, we're still scrambling for medium, and scrambling for medium was the reason why it became an experimental documentary. That was really the essence of it.
Thank you so much, Siraj and Shazeb. And it's so heartening to hear you guys talk about the artistic challenges of having made these films. And just before the Q&A started, Uma and I were catching up for a little chat. And just so you know, Uma is a professor, and she has shaped the lives and the minds of many women like me who went to Delhi University. But Uma joked that she's now a producer with Pension Pictures, which in itself is very telling of the funding environment for Indian documentaries. But also there are larger questions and problems of censorship, of other kinds of challenges. And I'm talking about the larger ecosystem challenges that you face, or people face as political documentarians. I mean, I would argue all documentaries are in some way political, but people face as documentary filmmakers in India. And it's a whole PhD thesis, but we'll try and talk about little aspects of that. So Uma, do you want to start on that? I think you're on mute, Uma. Sorry. You just have to unmute.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's despite the fact that you are, one of the challenges that Somnath has mentioned, or our young friends who were talking about Kashmir have mentioned, you may actually be part of a larger environment in which you share with others, but you are in some ways an outsider. And I became interested in this question of women who go to jail for their political work. And it started off with, now it's very prescient, because you can see so many of our young women are in jail. The people you never would have imagined would go to jail are in jail. So, but I was just going to want as a civil rights worker, as a democratic rights worker, I've always been interested in the question of the political, and how does that political shape or speak through the lives of people. So I, as a professor of Delhi University, I knew my students, some of my students went underground during 67 and so on, so there was this ambience in which we knew that there were radical revolutionary characters around, and they are doing something which is interrogating the system. So I decided that this is the film I wanted to make. Now, once I started off that process, the funding was a huge problem because nobody's going to give it. And especially, see, to my mind, everybody was playing safe. They don't want to touch films which are going to be controversial. But at this point of time, it's even more problematic because then if you don't make films, see, there is a huge difference between speaking in an oppositional voice and speaking in a voice. And there are huge numbers of documentary films that also speak in the voice of the let's say the establishment. Okay. And you only have to think of, go back in history. I don't know, you are all very young, but there was Sukhdev, who made films, he worked for films division. He made good films. When the emergency came, he had to make a film on the emergency, and he made it, and it was a horrendous film. But it was absolutely statist and whatever. So that's the context in which people are giving you funding, and they will give you funding for doing the trendy, even the nice new trendy things. There's a sort of pattern. So now, if you do gender, you get money. If you do whatever, so there is a way in which even in the opposition there are certain things which are acceptable, and there are certain things that are not so acceptable. So I found myself with nobody wanting to give me any money, and I was stuck. So I just now the young have the energy perhaps to go do crowdfunding. I couldn't get my act together. I couldn't manage to do crowdfunding. So because I said, oh, am I going to make the film now, or am I going to look for this crowdfunding? So I just decided, to do what I did, and I put half my pension away every month to make the film. And then it was, instead of being one film, it turned into 3 films, 4 films. And I don't know how many films are going to come out of this experience of women who went to jail. Now and how oppositional it is today is so clear, because then you can't be in a civil rights protest, you can't be in a feminist protest. I mean, Shaheen Bagh, after all, is a protest of women. Who would have thought women who sat over there on the pavement day after day and did something that we were all wanting desperately, gender, we went on. But when they actually went off and did this protest, and they come out of it, and for your WhatsApp images, for your WhatsApp messages, you're sitting in jail now. What the hell? So in that scenario, how do you actually speak to the politics of your time and also manage to get funding? So it's a big constraint. And just for the record, I want to say also that I wouldn't go for international funding. I did not want to go to international funding because already we are in the bad books for it, whatever. Then there'll be whole questions of FCRA and the whole business of human rights wallahs. You get funding from human rights wallahs outside, you're definitely something who's doing. So in a sense, you're actually put into a box. There is nothing available. It's easier to make a feature film, because you'll get some funding. Somebody will fund you, some nice guy will fund you. You just see so we are in this situation where you're trying to make films that speak both to history, to our times, and to the future, perhaps. Where's the money? There's no money. Absolutely no money. So the challenges are huge.
Thanks, Uma.
That actually takes me to Somnath. Somnath, I know that in your films, the films that you've made so far and the film that you're currently making as well, you really try to use alternative models of funding and production as well, in addition to, trying to do something different with the actual filmmaking. And I know that you've relied a lot on crowdfunding and sort of tried to make your films community films, sourcing funds from the community, and then also making the films available for the community. Like Battle of Bhima Koregaon is actually free on YouTube and was also distributed to many organizations across the country to host on their own websites. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of trying to do things in this way differently and collectively? I know that it's utopic, but it's not easy at all.
Devika, you might need to repeat parts of your question because I think for a minute there we lost Somnath.
Oh, okay. Is Somnath here now?
Hello.
Yes, he's back, but his video is stuck. So
You had some network issue. Yeah, I continue with ma'am. Actually, funding is the biggest issue. I feel, thing is a, privileged man activity in India. I think across the globe. Filmmaking is very, without the privilege is very painful. For me, filmmaking is a very painful, and now it's due because I'm making 3 films. My first film's budget is almost 5 or 6 thousand, not a lakh. And second, even we don't record the sound for first film. I'm not rich. We record the sound in my mobile, and we use.
Oh, I think we
Hello,
lost you,
you hear me?
Somnath.
Hello.
yes, if you can just repeat.
Hello.
Yeah, just
Okay,
repeat what you were saying
yeah.
about recording
So
on the phone. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, so for my first film, we record, separate, people are recording a separate sound. So we don't use separate sound recordist, or no one is there. So we record voice sound in my mobile phone. And for second film, Battle of Bhima Koregaon, we don't record a separate sound because we don't have money. So the entire budget of film is 1.5, and that's money. Someone write an email to some people, and they give some fund for a post production mostly. So funding is biggest issue, and the second issue, I think, crowdfunding. Sometimes I feel is very irritating process to write to people or go on social media and appeal to people is give so much anxiety, because when anyone give you fund now, that person, what my experience is, someone give you 5,000. I don't insult them people, but when any person give you fund, he come in a Mumbai, he write a message. Okay, he just send a message and say, hi, how are you, I want to meet you. Okay, so lot of it, if you are go on online, people give you a lot of, we don't know sometimes, we don't know person, but this process gives you so much anxiety. And another thing, this field, there are a lot of people. Okay, I think documentary filmmaker, there are a lot of fellowships and grants, but they need network. I don't have that type of network to use network for a funding or marketing. So I think one issue is funding, and second, I think a political, if they are branding you, like I never say I'm a Dalit filmmaker. Okay, so they don't. If you are a Brahmin or if you are any other caste in India, journalists, without asking you, writing, they give you identity. Okay, it's like if you are a Dalit or Adivasi or Muslim, they categorize you. So I am facing this issue also. They don't call me just as a filmmaker or just as a PhD scholar. They give Dalit filmmaker. This is also very problematic.
Oh,
Thanks, Somnath. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, we don't also talk about the emotional cost of trying to do things differently and funding. Like, I think that's what Uma was also getting to. Like, do you make the film or do you sit and do crowdfunding, and then how do you honor the relationships with the people that you're getting money from? So, thanks for bringing these things to our attention, which I think people on the outside of this world don't realize, like all the little things. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also that question of, and I know Uma wanted to steer clear of international funding, but even, and Devika and I, we talk about this a lot, that, what kind of Indian documentary gets international recognition and funding, that's a whole different, like sometimes gender is the buzzword and sometimes poverty, or like sometimes something else. So Sarnik, if you would like to touch upon any of the challenges, and just not, it doesn't have to be limited to SOS, but the larger picture challenges of being a documentary filmmaker in India.
It's a tough one, right? Yet when we just hours and days talking about it, and still won't be enough. It's the fact that there is no government funding, and with the kind of funding which is available in Europe for from the state to make films, it just boggles your mind that they would give 70% of the film budget can come from the state, and that something like this exists, and that it is possible. I feel like if here, I like to think of our work as Mazduri. Like, you basically do years and years and years of Mazduri, and you have to basically leave it to God and the honesty of your process and the uniqueness of your vision and the marketing that you can, and the networking that you can do. You have to basically leave everything else and just make that one film. I feel like the cost is so high. You don't have a social life. You don't have great mental health because you're chasing only one project for years. And so there is no gratification of an ending in sight. Um, yeah, it's a lot of work, but I feel like it is amazingly rewarding because how many people get to say their bit, where it matters, where it is shared, how it is a privilege to be able to meditate on a subject for years and years and try to get uh, uh, to the core of it. And I do not I do not say it lightly, but um, like, there is value to this. And when we live in this age where everything's so Instagram worthy and everything's so fast disseminated, and you need capsules of things, um, as painful as it is, and like Somnath was saying, it's easier if you have privilege. If it's easier if you have a husband who can pay your rent or plan, and these are things not to be taken easily or scoffed at, because it's a huge privilege to get to do every day, wake up and do that thing that you want to do. So as documentary filmmaker, I feel like you learn to accept the, I don't know, for lack of a better word, the charity or the philanthropy or the, which you see as problematic. You can see how problematic it is when Bedatri says that a certain kind of films would come from India. Completely true. But within that, you try to find your own unique honesty. You try to find honesty with your subject, with your process. You try to be conscious of it, and and aware of it, and I have just, I mean, mental health, no one talks about the fact that when you're working on something for so long, your mental health really takes a hit. How do you plan your finances? Do you not have a right to be paid? When you live in a city like Bombay and everyone around you is a freelancer with rates which are crazy, it's an abomination. It's a crime to think of making a documentary. It's a crime to think of collaborating with people. And then you do find partners. Then you do find people who look at the fact that you've been working on it for 3 years, and they come and join forces. And yes, they don't do it for free, but they charge you much, 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 much lesser than they would charge normally. And they take out the time, and you're surprised every day by the generosity of the people who collaborate with you. So it's I, for lack of a better word, again, I would say it's a way of life. It's a way of being, making documentaries in which raising funds is a part of it. And as challenging as it is, sometimes I have done 2 crowdfundings for this film, and I completely agree with Uma. I completely agree with Somnath that it's a fucking painful process, and why should anyone have to go through it? But the fact that people do take out that 5,000 rupees for your film, for your vision, or just for the sake of the friendship that they share with you, initially it's normally the people you know that would be contributing the first round of money, but you hound them, you remind them every day, you touch base every day, and the fact that they do, you come back feeling like it is possible because there are people who do, and there are people who contribute in terms of time, in terms of their inputs, in terms of everything. So I mean, there are, because it's such a long process, it's such a thankless process, it's good to remind yourself every day that you're doing it for yourself, because otherwise feeling like a martyr, that there is no money, there is no nothing, I mean, it's not going to take us anywhere. We choose to make the kind of film we want to make depending on the subject or the subject of the film. So your creative landscape or your visual landscape is determined by the subjects that you're dealing with. Sometimes our subjects are very, very immediate, which need to be tackled hands-on right now. You take all the technological challenges or lack of technology in your stride, and you use the technology that is available to you. We do have cell phones to record sounds on. Thank God for that, because it just seems like because of cell phones, because of having access to a camera all the time on you, it is possible to get your message out. It is possible to tell a story. It is possible to we are generally also driven by the fact that it is also our careers, the fact that we are also ambitious people, the fact that we also want to take our films to a larger audience. We want international audience, that we constantly have to make these choices. Do I do this or do I do that? And sometimes you just realize that you have to, and because the only answer is because you chose to do it. And now just know that it is hard, accept the fact that it's going to be hard work every step of the way, make peace with it, don't fight it, you will find it. So when people ask me like what are the challenges, the challenge really is that it takes very, 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 very many years. But that's how, at least what I have decided to deal with it, that whatever comes along the way, this film is very important to me. I have to. So, and that's where it ends for me.
Let's go to Siraj and Shazeb. You already talked about the artistic challenges, like the difficulty of finding a medium, the difficulty of translating a lived experience to another person. What about the, I guess, practical, challenges of being documentarians who want to explore these subjects?
I think hearing Uma ma'am and the other guys talk about it, there's a benefit of being like MA students, and when you're in your final semester, you don't think about stuff like a lot of things. You just take your cameras and you move out of your homes or your classes. And we also recorded most of our stuff on cell phones. And the concept of money and crowd, this is an alien concept to me. I mean, when Uma ma'am was talking, I was constantly thinking in my head, like, हमें क्यों नहीं पैसों की जरूरत पड़ी, हमने क्यों नहीं किसी से मांगे. And the fact that we used our stuff, and because it was a student film, we didn't think a lot about taking renting extra equipment or doing something. We used our phones and our cameras, and maybe in future we'll also require this, and we'll need guidance on how to get money. But for this film, because
sorry for butting in, Shazia, but age makes such a difference, right? Like, I feel like young people are so enterprising. They're like, it doesn't matter. And because if it has to be done, they will do it. And, please don't think about
if I'm being honest
a
with
more
you,
expensive way of doing it. Do it on the cheap where you don't need the money and you're doing it on your own.
if I'm being honest with you, I'd never till right now, I'd never even thought about money and how that was also a factor. It must sound crazy to you right now, but we never thought about money. And because it was a student film, I mean, that makes a difference. And we were doing it for a class project, and then it sort of went into a different way and became something bigger. Yeah.
And I also think, as students of a J school, let's not deny there is an amount of privilege that we had. We were in the sense that if I could go and borrow a prime lens from a friend, and we didn't have any prime lens, we didn't even have 2 tripods. We had 1 tripod that I had bought from debate money. So like you find friends in J schools, and that is a privilege that they can share your equipment, and they can give you a prime lens, and they can give you a camera for a day, and then you can just shoot and come back and you can share these things. And that's definitely a privilege. But I also feel like, in terms of A Season in My Paradise in particular, and since it is a student film and it is our first film, is that we didn't have a lot to spend in terms of production. Like, you just had to roam around a lot, and you had to, even the subjects where they've been interviewed, the locations that they've been interviewed, it's the campus itself, and you would bring them in, you would set up this lighting, and I remember working with 5 rupee, crepe paper so that we could have that yellow lighting, because we didn't have warm lights. So we would be like, let's pretend we have warm lights, and we would put it on. Sometimes when we didn't have lights, we would put it on tube lights. Like, the campus has these huge these spotlights, and we would climb up the spotlight and we'd put this paper in, and then we'd tell the guards, it's just for half an hour, it's just for half an hour. It wouldn't be for like hours, and we'd sometimes leave it because we just like the way the light changes its color. And in terms of that has always been something. I really think that the reason why we are able to execute a film like this with the equipment we have is there is an amount of privilege. And yes, it's a cheap film, to be honest. The production isn't really that expensive. You're roaming around Delhi with your very, like, you're going to get grainy footage, and and you're just okay with it, but you just really want to tell this story. And so you'd bring this back on the edit table, and you'd be like, let's make what we have, let's do with whatever we have. So audio would be recorded on a phone, and we would debate amongst ourselves in who has the best audio recording. Well, none of us did, really. And you hear that in the theater, and you go like, well, the audio is shit. So but in terms of telling that story, I think we were always told that stop worrying about the production. Stop worrying about how high quality you want it to look. Worry about how that story tells, how that conversation, how that interview tells, how that subject of yours by the end of that film feels, and people who watch that feel. So I think that was really the intent. But yeah.
Just jump in for a minute, sorry. Only for a minute.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that, in a way, impulsively, I did the same that so many of our young friends are saying here. I actually began to make the film with no money, absolutely none. But I would ride on everything that was an invitation for me. So if I was to go and speak in some place like Calcutta, then I get my camera, I'll get hold of a camera woman from there, and the cheapest possible that you can. And often there was goodwill, because there was this sense that, okay, here's someone who's trying to do something, and so many people actually work for you. I can't do camera work myself, okay? And I can't do anything except be the director and conceive the film. I can't do anything at all. So you start making the film with nothing, with this kind of situation. And people are really good, because they are like, they share the politics of what you're doing, and so they join in whatever. Then comes the real rub, because at the end of the day, the real money goes into editing. I don't edit. I don't know how few people do your editing. So editing is the most expensive thing, and it's not unfair, because the editors also live on that work. So how can you not pay them? So you have to pay them. All right. Then it gets more fancy, because then you have to clear up the sound. Then you get to the sound fellow. He'll take a nice bomb of 75,000 of you, or whatever it is, and then you go to the the color correction and stuff. So all the cost is actually at the post-production stage. It's like you shoot the film, on literally on shoestring budget. But then all the problems start. And if you don't do that, in some ways you're faulting the, let's say the process of, trying to produce something which, I suppose some way, as someone who's a teacher, you do want to make it as good as it's possible. So, at the end of the day, all the compromises that you may make have to be shaped by this larger question of that. Sometimes I wonder, and I wish this for all of you, if you get some money as the award, but nobody will give me an award because of the kind of films that I make. So the award money will go back in, will be immediately, it will validate the fact that you made the money. But that hasn't happened. It's so sad. No awards.
No, but also,
So, what I'm
sorry, I just wanted to, Siraj,
go ahead.
because you brought in that idea of high production versus story. In all honesty, when Devika and I were programming this series, that's a question we asked ourselves because, the global audience, the North American audience, they're used to, or they take a certain kind of high production for granted.
Glossy.
Very like, and if you look at Netflix, the Netflix documentaries, there's like this
Yes.
gloss to it, this polish to it. And Devika and I had conversations about a lot of these films that, oh my God, will it look good in like X resolution or this or that? And then I think both of us also came to that decision that, we can't, that's not a fair benchmark to have when, and we agree with you when you said that the story takes precedence because that's what we did. We were like, no, this people need to know about this. Forget about how beautiful does this look. So that's something, that's a decision even we were faced with.
Yeah. And actually, related to what Bedatri is saying, and I kind of want to pose this question back to you guys, like, there is the question of the money that you need to make the film, right? And so maybe you can start making it with no money, you can scrounge it up. If you're a student, you can beg, borrow, whatever. But how about getting the film seen? Because, getting it through distribution and exhibition, channels is the way to actually make money from it, right? Like if you want to have a career just making films, you either have to rely on grants or like some other job, or you have to make sure that the film actually gets seen. And so that's also something like, what Bedatri is saying, like we talking about what a documentary needs to look like to be seen was a question we wanted to challenge. Obviously, what we're doing isn't like, money-making enterprise for anyone here. But like, if you wanted to like actually sell your film to Netflix, you have to, I guess, think about those considerations. So I'm curious if any of you have thoughts on that as well. Like, how do you do filmmaking as a career? Like as a project, everything you're saying makes sense. Right. Can you do it as a career?
That's what I was trying to say earlier, Devika, that I think that if to make it sustainable, to make it turn it into a career, the approach has to be different in terms of the basic requirement that I am going to work towards getting paid. I am going to work. Yes, I'm making a film. Yes, it's an independent film. Yes, I'm putting in the initial investment by putting in my sweat, blood, money, time, effort, research, story, everything is that I can. I'm bringing it to the table. I'm shooting it myself. I'm researching it. I'm recording sound. All of that is great. But the fact that I know that I am going to also work towards somehow finding a way to getting paid, to making it sustainable, that it is a career, that I want to do it for the rest of my life, that I have to find the avenues, because it's not like the avenues don't exist. And it is it's a shame that it's such an ambitious rigmarole that they put you into. It's like or do you do this, where it becomes almost like a choice. Or should my film look should be technically sound, look good, look polished, also be a great researched, or should I tell the urgency of the story right now? these are choices that we as artists, as filmmakers, as storytellers have to make every day. And that's what I was meaning by coming to your own unique honesty. This is why I do what I do. I think that becomes such an important question to ask of yourself and to answer for yourself, because it's hard. Every day is so hard. To find motivation is hard. To find money is hard. To get paid is hard. To pay other people, you never get paid because you're always paying other people. At what point do you draw a line and say, okay, this needs to stop because it's not a project, it's my life. It's also my career. I do want my film to be seen. Netflix isn't inaccessible. Foreign funds aren't inaccessible. It requires a route. Am I willing to, is my story that one that would be of international interest, or is my story something which is of Indian interest, hyper local interest? These are as not all of your subject. If you're looking at it as a career, then not all of your films are going to be for the international audience, nor are all of your films going to be for a domestic audience. So all I was trying to say was that this need to be a filmmaker will eventually bring you to this question, that it is also my life, that I also deserve to be paid, that I also I should be paid for my effort, and that my film should be seen by as many people as is possible. If then Netflix is that, then great. Or if it is state festivals, it's great. But at all points of time, my film's subject is also going to decide that for me, or my approach to the film, or my language of the film, or so all of these factors end up deciding a lot of things for us, which are so kind of decide for us for how long we get to pursue this meaningfully, honestly, and consistently.
So, we are kind of at the end of our time, but we wanted to sort of wrap up with a general question for all of you. Just briefly, it's a big question. So, just like whatever comes to your mind, but what do each of you think is the role of a documentarian today? What is the role of a documentary filmmaker in like contemporary society? Somnath, I wonder if you want to jump in. We haven't heard from you in a minute.
I think you're on mute, Somnath.
Yeah,
we can hear you now.
I think role is political honesty. Speak the issues of your nation, your society, your community in political honesty, with political honesty. Yeah.
Thank you. Who wants to follow that up?
No, I'll jump in. I'll take off. He's absolutely right. It is actually, I see the role particularly of a documentary filmmaker as one who's responding to the politics of your time. So in a sense, everything else follows from that. So the subjects that you choose, and I can see from everybody who's sitting over here, okay, they have actually chosen subjects which are deeply political, and part of the problem of whether it's funding or this or that or the other comes because of that, But anyway, the point is that this process of making the film is also because you want to speak to your time. So which means screening is extremely important. If you can't screen your films, what is the point of engaging with your times politically if screening is not available? So one of the big crises of the documentary scenario is that we don't have dedicated screening opportunities, and really I don't think Netflix is an option. I'm sorry to say it, but Netflix is not going to buy some of the subjects that we are going to deal with because it's not sexy enough, it's not trendy enough. So how will you get it? At the end of the day, that's really less of an option. So I think that this question of, but I also look at it as, because I'm a historian, I also look at it as I'm also actively engaged in the process of archiving my times. So, all right, it gets seen now, it does, it's slow to run, it's slow, whatever it is. I mean, I was delighted when you were showing Aiken Club, because I thought it had been put aside. But there is an audience for it, and if it's an audience, then that's great. So I think that at the end of the day, but it's also an archive. So, people sometimes ask for it, and ask for it from the point of view of history or whatever it is. So it seems to me that you're doing that also, and you're leaving something behind for the future. So I don't see, I see that as the real satisfaction of making a film.
If I may jump in, Uma ma'am earlier talked about, talking about the politics of our time and calling out to the politics. And I think therein lies the biggest challenge, and your biggest role as a filmmaker. At a time when authoritarian tendencies are on a rise all across the globe, even in North America, where you guys are, I think the central role of a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker today, is to document, as ma'am said, as archiving our times. And one maybe not as proficient and experienced as ma'am, but you can try. And I think the biggest role is to document evidence. And at the end of the day, I see it as that at a time when it is when a gargantuan state like India is putting all its might behind stifling dissent and doing everything it can to stop people from registering their protest. At a time, I as MA students, we were able to do that. I'm extremely happy and proud about it, and it also resonated with a global audience, however minute it may be, but it did, and I think that's the role. Yeah. And thank you guys for the platform. Yeah.
I think more than anything, I mean, I worry about how long the role of the documentary filmmaker exists, because I mean, at this point of time, I mean, when I look at it, and this is perhaps a cynical take, and I hope I'm wrong, but in the times we are living and what we intend to do with these films, I mean, what did we intend to do with Season in My Paradise? The idea was that you wanted somebody who agrees with the abrogation of Article 370, who has a very nationalistically driven understanding of Kashmir, would for a moment take this and say, I feel different. And I don't think our films do that. And I don't know if even while archiving these films, we are making any change, because we live in very, I don't want to say dark times, but we are living in times which are, you're left to be nothing more than cynical. And so I really worry and wonder, how long does that role exist? Because you're living at a time when there's so much content. I mean, you can do the most, you can film the most heartbreaking thing in the world, and some people would, we're living in such a polarized time, somebody would just be like, yeah, so what? And then you really worry whether this medium is doing enough, and what if now? And so I think for both Shahzeb and I, experimental filmmaking was that opening, that you want to do something different, you want to do more than archive, you want to tell it in a different fashion. And then you look at Netflix and you look at the other platforms, and it's not going to happen through them. This whole thing that Uma ma'am talks about, this need for glossy, sexy films, I can't make that. No, we're just not equipped to do that. We can't see a film and say, well, how is it going to look beautiful? I can't imagine going to somebody who's gone through a hellhole of pain and say, well, how do I tell your story in a sexy fashion? I can't. And that's so, it just begs the question. And I think we keep asking this question, is how long do we exist as documentary filmmakers? I'm a journalist for The Wire. I keep asking myself the question that what's the point of these video packages? Where do we go at the end? Do people really care? And so that, and I'm sorry, I'm being cynical, but that's definitely a question.
Again, I'll jump in there. I'm sorry, yeah. I'm not going to let you be cynical. You're Gen Next, huh? If I'm cynical, I'm going to be turning 80 very soon. Okay, I have a right to be cynical, because I'm going to say, मेरे सामने तो ये दुनिया बदलने नहीं वाली है, मैं तो मर जाऊंगी इसी सिचुएशन में, अल्लाह को प्यारी हो जाऊंगी. और but तुम लोग, you cannot say that. You cannot say that. You have to. And I want to. People do watch and they do respond. I was screening, I also made a film on Kashmir after Article, whatever it is, 370. And it was screening in Chennai. And, I was wondering, and some army man got up on there. And he said, ma'am, you're the one who should get an award. you know, and I was like stunned. But he's talking about the fact that I didn't know that there were these human rights abuses. So even if that two people get converted, to your point of view, you know, and at the end of the day, and I'm sure Somnath, I mean, his films, look at the relevance. The Bhima Koregaon is not Bhima Koregaon only that battle. It's actually, look at the way it's unfolding in history. So there is actually, I feel that yes, we can feel, let's say, concerned, but I don't think we should actually stop the process and feel that you can't do. Yeah, find other. I mean, I was a teacher all my life, so I have a pension. Lucky for me that I have a pension, because most people now don't get pensions. But the fact of the matter is that, okay, get alternative job somewhere, read, write, do whatever it is. But then I think the films need to be made, and they have to be made, and they do speak. I don't believe that they don't speak. So I'll encourage you on the fact that please, whether it's a small mobile, it's this or that, do make it. Keep making the films.
And stories are so much more important than give them credit for. We are not just journalists, right? We are approaching it like an art form as well. We are telling stories. So we are not journalists.
Yeah.
And our stories need not be boring and look a certain way. There is nothing wrong with a glossy story which is telling you a truth or telling the politics of the time. There is nothing wrong with this approach or that approach. As much access or audience on YouTube, there are ways of reaching out to people. I'm just saying, we just have to be enterprising. We just have to be smarter, and we just have to find a way to stick to it, and everything else will follow.
Somnath, do you have some finishing thoughts? Or not to put you in any pressure. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we need to make a films. I'm happy with, there is a lot of pain, but I'm happy with the filmmaking actually, and I think we need to repeat this thing with the political honesty, because I saw there is a lot of people, in Indian context, you without touching the caste, how recently I saw one journalist contact me for a comment. There is a new documentary, very fancy documentary on Netflix on IIT students, some alma mater or something. So they will not touch the biggest social problem in our campuses. So I think film. I'm happy with the filmmaking. I made a film with the pen. But I think we filmmakers, need to speak social realities in our society, not to avoid, gender or caste or tribal or Dalits and even, a lot of filmmakers, they see, the marginal communities as a data, as a story. So they are humans. Look your stories as a humans, Muslims as a humans, Dalits as a humans, women as a human, not just as a, don't look just as a story, this story as also a human life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I think,
I could go on.
I think that's a great note
Yeah.
to end on. I mean, I feel like, we could just go on and on, but I know it's late for all of you. Our day has just begun, but it's time to wrap up. And I also just wanted to say, this last discussion was, sort of cynicism and then optimism, and Uma telling us all to be optimistic. And I just want to say, at least Bedatri and I can say that each and every one of your films touched us, informed us, changed the way we looked at our history or the world. And that's why we wanted to share it with more people. And, a lot of our friends here have watched these films and written with really great feedback. So something to, cling to, that, there is hope and there is an audience, and, we definitely want you to keep making movies. However,
Just to
you-
clarify, my point wasn't that I would stop filmmaking. I mean, we can't. But then it's just that, that creeps in. But I'll take Uma ma'am's advice and I'll choose to keep the cynicism for my, like, later on when I can say to the next generation. So I'll keep it for that.
No, but also before we end, I would like, both Devika and I would like to thank the Kolkata People's Film Festival, Public Service Broadcasting Trust, the Arsenal Institute for Film and Video, Moinak Bishash and Sangeeta Sen for their support and assistance. They have been extremely instrumental in guiding us towards the films we should watch and consider for the program. And for that, we are extremely grateful. And of course, to Saeed and Maysles for this for like letting us do this. And thank you so much, all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to
Thank
the
you.
group, and thank you to the two of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.